Any announcements? Okay. You're not gonna do-
One.
Yeah,
Just
thought
one,
so.
But not that, something
Oh,
else.
something else? Okay.
Just-
Good evening, everyone. I don't think we're on yet. It says got it.
I'll get it. Don't worry, that's just the meeting.
You are live,
Mayor. You're live.
Okay, thank you. It's now 7:40. We're going to do the pledge and then go into the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Stuart, is there the explanation of the difference between the work session versus?
I did not have those upstairs.
Okay. All right, we can explain it verbally if people don't understand. All right, this is a work session, not a legislative session, just so people know. It's the last one in August. We have a lot of people on vacation. Trustee Fritchie is away this week. I think next week you're away, but we're not having meetings, so you are not.
I'm here.
Uh-huh. We're having one morning meeting, right? Okay. Announcements, nothing for you.
I just one, I guess, just a little more to the Ecuadorian community. They're going to be celebrating the August 10th independence of country. And there's a big celebration. There's always a big celebration in Crown Point Park. And that's going to be happening on August 13 from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So one of the beauties of that is like you can taste our food, which is really good. Any type of food that you want. Music, if you like Spanish music, they usually have traditional dances, just to share a little bit of our culture as well. Big influence, obviously, from, thinking on my behalf, thanking this country and everything that has welcomed us to be part of this beautiful community. So if you like Spanish music and if you like Ecuadorian food, please stop by at Crown Point Park this Sunday, August 13th from 10 to 7 p.m.
Why don't you do also yesterday's meeting, just the same way with the mayor, no?
No, I think it's a little bit more. I need to figure out where
Okay.
we're going before.
All right,
Yeah.
if you don't want to do it, I'm not. Manny and I had a meeting, but I think you want to talk to the board first. No, it's okay.
Yeah. So
You'll mention to the board and then we.
yeah,
can-
I think we met with a mayor from a part of a community from Ecuador yesterday. It was a very good meeting. It was just to kind of introduce ourselves to him. I mean, I have that in the past as well with other political figures from Ecuador. It was a very nice meeting. He's actually spending a couple of days here. He was visiting parts of Queens. He was in Queens as well. He was, I think, in parts of Westchester. He was going to Jersey to visit some of the Ecuadorian communities, visiting people from their town itself, just to see, the evolution and kind of seeing some of the stuff that happens here. He's a newly elected mayor. So it was just an interesting meeting for now. So, but it's more things that I need to discuss, obviously, with the whole entire board. And maybe, we may have a future meeting explaining a little bit more of what detailed meeting of what that was. But for now, it's just a very, very preliminary meeting. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So I went as well to the meeting and it was really great because the really wonderful thing about living in a diverse community is that you see the connective tissue globally. And the people in the community invited them. And so it really comes from inside the community to meet others. We have 2 sister communities, one in Italy and one in Portugal. And so it was just interesting to see what's going on elsewhere. And so I think that's it for the announcements. And early today, Deputy Mayor and I were at the waterfront with many of our government colleagues for Senator Harcum to announce a CREST grant, and that's really for electrifying, solarizing, etc. The municipalities, instead of having different villages, towns, villages, whatever, in his district compete. Oftentimes we have to do that, and a few of us get more money, but it's a lot of work. he decided that every municipality in his district would get $100,000 since they know their local community best, that they would use that in whatever way they think makes more sense in a way to reduce carbon emissions. And it was nice to meet mayors and supervisors from other communities. And we were well represented because the town's a separate municipality. They get 100,000 and the village, and that's actually not that uncommon. You know, there are many communities that are like ours where it's 2 or 3 different pieces of it. So the board will discuss further. I got a couple ideas I discussed with the village manager and with some of you. We'll talk more about it. Okay, great. Now we switched the agenda a bit, right? Originally it was supposed to be, I spoke to Valerie Monastro, it was supposed to be one item, which is the code enforcement, which is a multi-year initiative to go through all of the decades of codes that have been voted on, created, changed, enhanced, removed, which causes, I think, an inability for the average human to read through these hundreds of pages of codes, even for some lawyers. So we decided a year ago to take this on as a project and to hire people along with our council to see if we can refresh the code. It's a dry subject, but Valerie Monastro is here along with Stuart. But we added the boathouse, which is a topic that came across my radar screen, I think on Friday, when I got a call. So we're going to do the cabaret piece first, and then we'll move to the rest of the meeting is what we're going to do.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay. So just for notification, a trustee, mayor, etc., does not have to notify the public why they're recusing themselves. It's simply their belief that they should not be involved. That doesn't mean just the vote. It means that Trustee White will not be getting emails or information about anything related to this going forward, because she's recused herself from this subject matter. Okay. It's a work session. Corporation Council.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, folks. First tonight is the cabaret application on behalf of the Boathouse, formerly, not the formal name of Up the River Restaurant, Inc. The establishment is looking for a cabaret license, which would operate the cabaret Wednesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., Friday, Saturday, 7 p.m. to midnight, and Sunday, Sunday noon to 8 p.m. Their requested entertainment is live bands with up to 6 musicians, DJ providing music for parties and karaoke. The method of operation that the Boathouse filed with the State Liquor Authority lists live music, so that would be permissible by the board. There is no checkoff for either the DJ or the karaoke on the SLA documentation that was provided by the Boathouse. The application has been signed off by Building Department, Finance Department, and Police, and is now ready for this board's consideration.
So I just want to make sure, based on the emails that I saw, that now it is completed correctly for our consideration. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we have all the documentation that we need, that the board needs for its consideration. That is correct.
Okay. How's that different than what I said? Is that different than what I just
Well,
said?
I don't want to, I won't say that, I think completed is the question, is the point. I'm just saying that what we requested has been provided.
Okay. And all of the other entities looked into it.
Yes.
Okay, so there's only 3 of us. All 3 of us have to converse and decide what we want to do. So just for the public record, typically we discuss in work sessions. Work sessions are for the staff to bring issues to us. The public is welcome to observe. If there are situations, the following Wednesday, we vote. The council writes up the legislation piece or the license or whatever. and we vote the following week. It's a 2-week process. It's like that for everybody. In this case, we have an issue in that we don't have meetings. And even if we called a special meeting, we would not have a quorum because this week, because there's only, we just don't have the time to do it. And there's not enough people to do it. We can't wait till next week. We don't have a meeting, and even if we did, we don't have enough people to vote. We will not, with a recused trustee, we do not have enough votes. It will not pass, given how we're set up. So the suggestion that was made a couple of days ago is, the suggestion that was made is that we do what we don't usually do. And I say this for the record, because I'm 100% sure that there will be other bars and restaurants that come in and say, why would you do this for them, but not do it for us? You're making an exception to something that you don't do for the other dozen plus places in this village. The problem is that we're usually, enough of us are around. We simply won't be around till after Labor Day, because we had not planned on doing it. And we can't call a special meeting on such short notice and have enough votes. So unless you tell me, Stuart, that we can't have a discussion, ask our questions, and then vote on it tonight, we're not going to be able to do this till after Labor Day.
You can discuss and vote if you choose, Mayor.
Okay. Got it. All right. Are there comments and questions? I have a bunch, but I like to go last. So please.
You can start. I don't have anything. Usually when it comes to these things, I ask the same set of questions, which are the times in accordance to the timescale that we've established village-wide, and these are there any issues with engagement with the police, particularly if there's been a past issue? Are there complaints? Are there any quality of life issues? That's not a case in this particular application, and so there aren't any immediate questions that I have.
Are you asking those questions?
No, it's Corporation Council said that they signed off, and I didn't get any indication that there were any complaints from the police. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's a sign off by Lieutenant Damiano in answering to the two questions. Have there been any complaints made against the applicant, or have there been any calls to OPD? Both were answered no.
Okay, that's where I stand.
Any questions or comments? You're up.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the same thing happened to the building department end, correct?
Building department, the initial inspection, they did not pass. They were then re-inspected and they did pass.
Great.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask one question and that may develop to other questions. So this is not the first time this application has been in front of us in regards to a cabaret license. Is that correct?
For this year,
Just in general.
the boathouse has been before the board in the past. That is
But
correct.
for this year,
Not
For this year. No, I didn't, that was not my question. My question was, have they been in front of us before in general?
Yes,
Okay, same application, same process, same requests.
presumably, yes, sure.
So one of the things that you had, that you mentioned is one of the questions that the mayor asked, and I'm not sure if you're gonna ask that, in a different way or the same way, but has the process been different this time than the previous times? Or the request of information?
We are requesting information to confirm that the establishment's method of operation is consistent with the request for the cabaret license.
Okay, so that's the only thing that was different this time around that has been in the past.
That's correct. That in the establishment questionnaire, but primarily the method of operation was what we have been asking of the applicants. That is correct.
Okay. I really don't have any additional questions at this point. I have other comments, but I'm gonna hold those for another time, another conversation.
all right. So in 2023, this is in front of us, the board that has to vote on this for the first time, correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay. So we're going to have to do it a little differently unless somebody tells me there's a problem. So what I'd like to do is, number one, have the conversation, get a feel, because it's just three of us. That's like, if one of us wants to abstain or not vote, it's not happening till after Labor Day. So issues, problems, or thumbs up?
I'm good.
Issues, problems, or thumbs up? Okay, now that you do have what we needed to have had, I'm fine with it. You noticed this because we spoke earlier today, right? That
Yes,
this would
ma'am.
be- All right, so what would be the next step? Because we don't do this normally.
The next
so-
step would be, well, first, we have a second short topic, which is the RFP, request for proposals for Labor Council. And
Okay,
then if the board, after that discussion, we would briefly adjourn the work session to go into special session, deal with those two resolutions, one for the boathouse, one for the RFP,
okay, got it.
then go back into work session.
Okay, because we're sort of doing multiple things in one meeting here today.
That's correct.
Okay. Dana, on the conversation regarding the RFP, I believe that you can be involved in that, yes?
Sure.
Even though, okay, so if you could step back in. You have any comments? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just
Oh,
gonna,
Oh, okay. Oh, no, you're going to the next thing.
I'm
Got
gonna
it.
just brief you on the the RFP.
So normally this meeting's actually the village manager comes
Correct.
in front of us. Go ahead.
But this is a few years back, we issued a schedule for professional services, review of professional services, making sure that for the most part, it's every 3 years, we do an RFP for our various professional services, and we have a schedule and rotate through. And this is, the purpose of this is to just make sure that we're looking at our professional services through a broad lens, making sure that we're getting the best value for the taxpayers' dollars. So right now, we would like to, the next one on our list is Labor Council, and we would like to issue a RFP for Labor Council within the next few weeks. So we are asking for board approval to do so.
Okay, I don't see problems. Anybody? Everybody's okay? I wrote an email earlier, why just labor and not land use? Aren't we doing both of them this year?
We'll be back at,
They'll
it's
come
just,
back with
it's just
that?
the timing of it. So we're just trying to, we also wanted to stage it so that we'll be able to do the interviews without having, if they hit all at once. So we're just going to time it, but we will be back in September with more requests for issuing proposals.
Okay, because I know there's always one or two trustees that wants to be in the interviews. So we just have to decide what's more efficient with having to
Right.
be here for multiple. Annie, it's like a dream come true. You sitting with a bunch of lawyers. And deciding and recommending who we do business with. Okay, so it looks like we're getting a positive on that. What specifically do we need to do?
We would now adjourn.
Right.
Can I have a motion to adjourn the work session to go into special session, please?
So moved.
All
Any
in favor?
comments?
Hi.
Sorry, Stuart,
Sorry, that's my
Aye.
mistake.
Aye.
Okay,
going
we are,
right through the speed dial here.
now we're into the special session, so let me quickly take attendance. Trustee.
Yeah,
well-
you need
well,
to
you
be
just have
here.
to say that you're here. Trustee
You need
White.
to be here for a quorum, which we have even with 3, but you need to be here for the quorum and then step away for one of the scenarios.
Trustee White.
Present.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lopez,
Present.
Trustee Kazada,
Present.
and Mayor Levin.
Present.
First resolution that you can stay for this. Sorry to make you jump up and down. Authorization for the village manager to issue a request for proposals for Labor Council services 2024 to 2026, resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to issue a request for proposals for the village's Labor Council services for a 3-year period commencing on January 1, 2024 and ending on December 31, 2026. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now, next resolution. Resolution approving 2023 cabaret license for Up the River Restaurant, Inc., the Boathouse, 46 Westerly Road, Ossining, New York. Whereas pursuant to chapters 100 and 171 of the Code of the Village of Ossining, the authorized representative of the business Up the River Restaurant, 46 Westerly Road, New York, presented an application to the village clerk as licensing officer for a cabaret license. And whereas pursuant to sections 100-3 and 100-5 of the code, the village clerk caused an investigation into said application. And after receiving the results of the investigation from the finance department, building department, and police department, the application was referred to the Board of Trustees for final approval. And whereas the Board of Trustees reviewed the application at the August 9, 2023 work session, now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to the code, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the cabaret license for 2023 for Up the River Restaurant, the Boathouse, as follows: Wednesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. until 11 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 7 p.m. until midnight, Sunday, noon until 8 p.m., type of entertainment, live music with up to 6 musicians. Further resolved that the licensee may request from the village manager an extension of the hours for the operation of the cabaret for a specific event on a specific date upon a showing of good cause. Be it further resolved that the licensee may request an extension of the hours for the operation of the cabaret no more than 1 day per calendar quarter, and that in no event shall the hours of operation extend past 2 a.m. Be it further resolved that no fewer than 5 business days before the specific date for which an extension of the hours of the operation of the cabaret is sought, the licensee by its authorized representative shall present to the village manager a written request for the extension of the hours of operation of the cabaret. And be it further resolved that upon receipt of the request for an extension of the hours of operation of the cabaret, the village manager or designee will contact the Ossining Police Department and Village of Ossining Building Department to determine if there are any reasons that the request should be denied or modified. And be it further resolved that the village manager will advise the licensee of his or her deposition on the written request no fewer than 2 business days before the date of the specific event. Be it further resolved that where the request for an extension of the hours of operation of the cabaret is approved, the village manager or designee shall notify the police department of the extended hours, which extended hours shall not extend past 2 a.m. Be it further resolved that the village manager or designee approval of the request for an extension of the hours of operation of the cabaret shall only be for the specific date and may not be used as a basis to extend the hours of operation for any other date. And be it further resolved that pursuant to section 100-9 of the Village Code, the Board of Trustees may revoke or suspend any cabaret license issued under Chapter 100 where the license was obtained by fraud or false representation of fact or failing to comply with the provisions of Chapter 171 licenses. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Before we do this, it occurred to me an oversight. I want to explain to there are people sitting here. This is a work session that went into a special session. We don't take comments unless somebody feels that there's something so important that we need to hear it. This is in the middle of a vote, and you've already heard what the trustees are going to do. I feel a bit awkward, Stuart, because I probably should have asked for, we don't take comments, but we've sort of done 2 meetings in the space of
It's-
one.
It's your, I mean, if someone wants to comment on the resolution before the board votes, you can certainly take if someone wants to comment.
Okay, well, I know where this is going, so I don't know if it's necessary because we don't do that. We've already stepped many degrees over for what we do for many of the establishments, not making me happy that we're doing it that way. But it's necessary because we will not be able to vote on this till way into after Labor Day. And that point, we are going to have really long and large and intense agendas. So I think this is the best thing to do. So I'm just going to go on with the vote. And then if people have commentary, they could write to us at the mayor, because that I think, or at the BOT. So
All those in
we're in the
favor?
middle of vote. Yeah, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, do we have a motion now to adjourn special meeting and return to the work session?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we're back now in work session.
Right,
Thank you.
just when is the cabaret license? What's the next step with this?
The clerk will be notified and the clerk will issue the license.
Okay, thank you. Next topic.
Hey, our next topic,
Zoning.
so
changes.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused on what I'm reading here.
I know, because we're
yeah.
doing multiple.
Okay,
things.
got it. Yes, I know that's the only other thing on here, but
Right.
it's still confusing. I'd like to introduce Valerie Monastra, who's our planning consultant. As you know, we have been looking, as the mayor had said previously, to streamline our zoning codes. This is the first step in the process where we're doing some basic housekeeping on definitions and just cleaning up some things that are relatively easier lifts with regard to zoning. Valerie has been working closely with our building inspector, Joe Augustinelli, as well as Maddie Zahach. Maddie, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everybody. I do not. I appreciate, and I'm sure the board does as well, that this has been a long process to get us where we are. But I think, with certainly Valerie and Stuart doing, the heavy lifting on this. I think we're really in a good place, and we're ready to hear the board's feedback on some of these preliminary changes. So thanks, Karen.
Okay, I guess I'll get started. Or Stuart, did you want to introduce?
Sorry, Valerie. I think Maddie can share the screen. So at whatever point you think
Okay,
we want to put something up for the board, we can.
okay. All right, so I'm sure the board saw that there's a lot of documents and there's a lot of details that were provided as part of your packets. We're here tonight for a work session only to talk about what it is that we're proposing to do, take any questions that you have. If the board decides to move forward with some or all of these changes, Stuart and I still have to create a local law which really defines everything that's going to be changed and what's going to be updated. And then we're also going to have to do a double check and cross-referencing to make sure that some of the definitions that we change are not going to have a ripple effect and throughout like the zoning chapter. So those are like the next steps. And then at some point, once we have a local law, draft local law, then it would be referred out to the planning board for their consideration. So this is just the beginning step. This is a little bit different than some of the other zoning changes that have come to this board because of the fact that there's a lot of housekeeping that's being proposed. And so it does require a little bit more careful consideration. But this is the changes that were provided as part of your packet are the ones that were identified as immediate changes, the housekeeping items. This is work that was undertaken by Pace University, myself, and as well as Stuart, and then also with input from the building inspector. So what I was thinking tonight is maybe touching upon each one of just very briefly on the documents, and then I kind of open it up for questions and answers from the board. So the first thing that I just wanted to mention, one of the documents that we provided you was for subdivision regulations. It's something very simple. Just the fact that the subdivision regulations, the expirations that you had in your current subdivision regulations does not reflect updated standards from New York State Village Law. So the changes were just made primarily to reflect the fact that you can have extensions to subdivision approvals where the current subdivision regulations provides basically requires a mandatory expiration. And so what has happened at the planning board is that some applicants who are still trying to get all their permits in place from like Westchester County, for example, Department of Health, have to come back and reapply for a subdivision approval because that expiration has met, and then the planning board is not able to extend the expiration for circumstances such as still getting approvals. So that's that's the change that is being proposed for the subdivision regulations. The other this is another change that's being proposed that's outside of the zoning chapter, and this is for excavations. There's an excavation and fill permit that's technically required for any soil removal or soil any sort of excavation of more than 5 cubic yards. And in the excavation chapter, it's a little confusing as to what the planning board needs to review or what the building department is authorized to move forward with. And part of it is that when the planning board does receive excavation and fill permits, it's a little hard it's also hard for the planning board to really understand what it is that they're really reviewing. And so what we're proposing to do, and this was a recommendation from the building department, is to remove the planning board review of it, and it really becomes more of an administrative requirement. So an excavation and fill permit is still required. The information that needs to be submitted is still required, but it will stay within the within the building department as opposed to the planning boards. So that is the changes for chapter 122 excavations in a nutshell.
Let's do chapter by chapter.
Sure.
please.
So,
All right. Questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, etc.
I'll start. Thank you for all of the work, Stuart, Valerie, others that contributed towards the effort. My question when it comes to 122 is with respect to capacity. What is one of the complaints that I have heard about the building department broadly that related to different things is the amount of time that it takes to get approvals of various kinds, particularly compared to other similar communities.
Right.
And so I see the logic in putting this in the building department, but if there are already delays, does this add additional work and would be making a situation that may be challenging worse? Would love for you to comment on that.
Right, so that's a really good question. In actuality, this will reduce the time for an applicant because they no longer would have to go to the planning board for the review. The review can take place in the building department. So what will happen now sometimes is that an application might come in and Joe will say it has to get planning board approval for the excavation and fill permit. And then it has to get put onto a planning board agenda. The planning board has to review it. And then ultimately it can be issued and they can move forward with the work. So this would allow that to not have that extra step of going to the planning board.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
So I'm going to agree with you 100% in that. And that's something that I had a conversation with Joe a couple months back, because I think it's just, and it gets to, I watch a bunch of meetings in regards to that exactly. And
Right.
I have no concerns on that. The other one, the first topic that you were talking about in regards to the subdivisions and
Yes.
not having more like an expiration date to it.
Right.
That's a little bit more concerning to me because we had in the past where we had modified some of the stuff. I think it was one of the latest when we did zoning variances, where instead of 6 months, we're doing a year. We extended that to 18 months, more or less. So I still think we should have something in there, like a solid number of a period of time, that instead of just, even though they have all the approvals, that they're banned to that as well. If they have zoning approvals or planning approvals, or architectural review board approvals, whatever the case may be, I think we should have some sort of they had to tie together at some point.
Right, no, absolutely. And so what we're proposing, so before was upon application, the subdivider, the planning board may grant up to 2 90-day extensions.
Two extensions, correct?
Right,
That's
of the
what I'm
original
getting, yeah,
approval.
yeah.
This one is where particular circumstances warrant, the planning board may by resolution extend the time in which conditionally approved plat in final form must be submitted for a signature. And then it says no more than 2 90 days, 2 extensions of 90 days each will be granted. So this allows for the planning board to provide additional extensions, as opposed to previously where they were not, after the 2 90-day extensions, that was it. And then they had to reapply
So
for.
explain to me a little bit on the planning board approval for a final plot shall expire in 62 days after the date of the planning board resolution authorize the chairman to sign. So that's pretty much, so that's not
Right.
consistent with the 90 days, but that's 62 days instead.
Right, and that would, and this reflects what is currently in New York State village law. So that's one of the things that prior to, there was updates done to the village law and especially specifically the subdivision regulations. And so we're updating the zone, the subdivision regulations to reflect the updates to the village law. And in addition, prior, it was, after the 90 days, they could, the planning board could issue 2 extensions and then that was it. This one will allow the planning board to issue more than 2 90-day extensions because of the fact that if there are circumstances that warrant additional considerations and to allow for the subdivision to continue, they can do so. They do have the ability at that point, if for some reason the applicant is just delaying to delay and there's no real reason, the planning board could say, thank you, but you need to reapply.
So in regards to that, so let me ask you this, because they still, this applicant, and for argument's sake, they have all the approvals and they're trying to figure out this from the county, from the state, whatever the case may be, sure. And in this case, they still have to go in a formal meeting in front of the planning board, correct?
Yes, so they still will have to go asking for the extension, but an example, recently before the planning board, the Birch Brook was still waiting for its approvals from Westchester County and a number of other Department of Health. And their subdivision expired, so they had to reapply for a new subdivision approval.
So let me ask you, and let's pause that for a minute, because we are trying to, pretty much nothing has changed in our application. If nothing has changed and they're just waiting for approvals, why can't it just be a regular sign off from the chairman of the board?
So
That's
theoretically,
something,
right, so theoretically, that's what we're trying to put in place, because what was happening before is that once the 2 90-day extensions took place, that was it. Then they had to reapply no matter what. And so they had to go through the application process again. So what we're proposing not only is to get this back in consistent with New York State Village law, but also to say that those 90-day extensions can continue.
but that's not, even here is not that specific, because to me it becomes more like a little bit more like the interpretation of the law, or the interpretation of the planner or the building inspector or the chairman of the board. So I think for me, in my opinion, it has to be a little bit more defined, a little
Okay.
more specific. Again, that's just my opinion. I'm not sure what the rest of the board feels, but if we're going to do this sort of have this concept, I think it should be better off if we actually are be very specific on this, because I would hate that 5 years, 10 years from now, a different board may see it differently. Be like, why these guys didn't do this the first time, which makes sense. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Sure, we can look at the language.
again-
I'll look at the village law language again.
But Valerie, that's just my opinion.
Okay, no, but I'm just saying, but for clarification purposes, if it's confusing, we can look at the language again.
Okay.
One point to just make also is the chairs of the planning board over the years have varied. Many of them do not want to do the sign off on their own, and in fact have wanted the full board to actually hear it. So there has been, I'm just making the point is there has been a reticence. There have been chairs who would have no trouble doing a sign off,
Yeah.
but there are other chairs who have been very reticent to do that and
Yeah.
always want to have at least a majority of the board to know that they're
I
doing it.
totally
So-
understand. I know. Again, if it's a complex project, I think that'll be the case. But if it's just literally is the same application, nothing has changed. I think I just don't see that being too much. And plus, you guys did this sort of. You said it's sort of in there, but not quite there. And I think that's sort of the interpretation of what you guys may want to accomplish. It's just trying to. I don't want to say how. If nothing has changed, to me, it just makes
Right.
no sense to put it only puts another layer of bureaucracy in front of the planning board, but also puts, another month into that. Maybe another application needs to be in front of the planning board. And that takes that away from that.
Right, so I think in a lot of communities where you're just able to do the extension, usually it's just a letter from the applicant, right? And that's sort of the intent that we're trying to do here, where right now it's a full application.
Correct.
So,
Now, even like for argument's sake, and not deviating from this conversation, but if I have a building permit and I want it and I haven't completed in a year works, I can always ask for an extension. I don't need to go through the whole process of getting my drawings review again.
right, and that's what these revisions are supposed to be stating. So we'll just make sure that it's clear. for
Again,
them.
that's just my opinion, but yeah. Thank you, Valerie.
Chapter 2.
3. Well, topic 3. I
You're
think.
right, topic, yeah.
All right, so then the rest of them all refer to the zoning chapter. So I'm gonna start with the tables. We did provide revised tables. The first is the use tables. All we did here was just consolidate the use tables. So right now you have, I believe it's about 6 tables for uses. And what we did was we consolidated those 6 tables down to basically 3 tables. So we are just proposing to, basically, the tables that you had in the Appendix A had the principal uses and then had a separate table for accessory uses. And we're proposing to put a lot of those onto the same table. So it's as simple as that. The Appendix B was your bulk regulations. And again, this was just to reduce the number of tables for people to look at when they're looking at the zoning code. And it just consolidates them onto, basically, we're down to 3 tables as opposed to 6 tables.
I have a question that's tangential.
Sure,
not necessarily about the tables.
okay,
The accessory units,
yes.
or accessory unit, could you define what an accessory unit is, please?
So, well, we have, you mean for accessory units in terms of like accessory apartments, or is that what you're referring to?
Yes, I think you're accessory units, so then I.
Right, but we don't allow accessory apartments in the village. We
Right.
just have accessory structures.
Right, accessory uses,
So it's accessory uses.
uses,
How's it
sorry.
Written there.
So, well, accessory uses is basically a land use that is subordinate in use, area, or purpose to a primary land use on the same lot or on the same premises. An accessory use may or may not be an accessory structure. Accessory uses may have separate use specific standards or may be defined as incidental to the primary use.
Okay, it has to be, it can't be separate from the building, or it can.
So accessory uses can be separate from a building. This is a use, not accessory unit,
So can I?
which is a little bit
Yeah.
different. So accessory use can be like
Okay, go ahead, give me. an example.
a greenhouse, like on somebody's property, accessory use. For example, in tools, a tool shed.
Garages?
Garages are not
It's a
specifically a
separate-
use,
This is structural.
right? That's an accessory structure.
Got it.
But
Okay.
like a clubhouse or fences and walls, home-based businesses, those are all accessory uses.
But some of them could be either an accessory office, for argument's sake, could be within the premises itself, doesn't have to be detached
Right.
from the structure, from
Right.
the main structure as well. So so just indulge me for 1 second. Accessory unit, and I know we don't have that here.
Right.
Oh, correct.
Right.
Not too far from us, the town of Austin, sure, you also as well do the planning for the town of Austin. So in the Stewart, you probably know better than I do as well. So an accessory unit,
Yes.
what is an accessory unit?
So typically an accessory unit, well, it can be one of two things. It's usually a smaller residential unit. It can either be interior to the principal building on site, or some communities also adopt accessory units as a separate. So it could be in, like, for example, in a garage, or you could have a standalone unit. And usually they limit the overall size of the units. And typically they will require owner occupied. So like the owner needs to occupy the main principal unit, and then they can rent out the accessory unit. There are some other regulations that they usually will add into the accessory units, but basically it's subordinate to the principal unit on site.
And we do have, we've discussed this with Valerie, discussed it with Maddie. For assessment purposes, there is an assessment which is called single with accessory apartment.
What does that mean exactly?
That is essentially a mother-daughter.
Right.
That is sort of and I spoke to the new assessor. It's more a feel by them as to what it is. Because again, it creates an issue for us. This is sort of separate from this, because the village does not have accessory apartments. We have 2 families. We
Right.
don't have accessory.
Right.
So sometimes the assessor will assess a property as accessory apartment, but to the building department, that's a 2-family.
Correct.
But basically, it is not the same. They don't view it the same as, they view it as the lesser of a 2-family. Basically, it's a smaller apartment, a
Can I
smaller.
can I ask you, and you know, if you don't know, and I hope you
Yeah.
do. So in that scenario, let's say, and if you don't know, I would love to know the answer tax wise, because obviously what you said is not really a 2-family, but it's sort of treated as a two-family in a way. So
So for
is the
assessment,
assessment, yeah,
for assessment purposes, it's treated, I believe it's what's called a 215, which is
So-
which is a single family with accessory apartment.
so I would love to know what the difference of a tax value is between that and a two-family home. And I'll ask the question to the assessors.
Yeah, Mike would
just to-
probably be in a better position to answer that,
that's-
but
I
that's,
just was curious to see what that means,
Right.
tax value ones, but
So the reason. So the reason I asked it, if you could make a note, a tangential note. In this process, it would be helpful to members of this community, certainly to people like me who have to vote on things. If we used definitions the same as the assessor. Or that we explain the difference. For example, when I tell people to figure out whether they live in the village or the town or in Briarcliff, I say, see who you pay taxes to. Because otherwise they start naming streets and I have to figure out whether they're to the right or the left of a pine tree. So it would be really helpful as we go through this really intense exercise that we have a conversation, whether the assessor has to come here in front of us or with you, the definitions be the same. So if somebody says this is an iPhone,
Right.
everyone says it's an iPhone, not two people say it's an iPhone and somebody else says it's a pocket terminal, right? Because the lexicon also matters.
Mayor, if I may, though. the
If it's
difficult-
possible, yeah,
apologize.
no, please.
Saying
I
the
made my point.
difficulty with that is that if we don't have an accessory apartment, we can't use that as a term.
Right.
We only have a two-family.
Right.
There is no accessory apartment in the village of Ossining.
Right, but we
So-
do have mother-daughters, right?
No, we don't allow that.
We don't allow
no,
mother.
pre-existing.
But
There is-
but
no, but that's-
that would be right. But
Right.
you know, there's one property in particular that I'm aware of because we've been dealing with it recently where it's clear that it is it was assessed for years as a single.
Mhm,
And then with the reval, it became a single accessory
I
apartment.
see.
But again, the village doesn't have that. So if we were to put a term in like that, we'd be putting in a term that would not have any reference to anything else in our code.
Okay,
So, and the other thing is for assessment purposes, their definition, what they use is far different than what we do under the zoning code. When I asked Mike, basically, how do you define what do you consider? He said, it's really just what I think based upon what I'm told, what's in the apartment. So it's not even a
Right.
finite definition
Right.
as to what they could put in. But in terms of accessory apartment in particular, we couldn't put the definition in because we don't have it in the village.
okay. I'd like to get there someday because it's, to the public, it's a single government. It's the village, the town, the this, the that. It's, okay.
Right. I mean, and well, that's an accessory apartment regulations would be, could be something that the board considers down the
I'm
line.
not talking about accessory apartments. I'm not a proponent of them.
Right.
I'm talking about definitions within a household. The people have created all these little things. And we name them one thing and the tax assessor names
Oh,
them
yes.
another.
So
I'm
yes.
talking about garages that have been turned into apartments that are not connected to the house and
Right.
all that stuff.
Yeah,
It's
so,
the other way around. I want to clean up the lexicon, not change our laws to suit the assessor.
right. And I think the difficulty with that, and this is just in general for all communities that I've ever worked in, it's just the way an assessment is made on a property is, just as Sue was saying, very different than the way zoning treats it. And it could very well be like as Stu was saying, like what's actually on the property, the assessor makes that determination. But like, for example, with like an accessory apartment versus a two-family apartment, there's actually some building code issues between the two of those. And so sometimes so that would be the determination to some extent
Okay.
on that.
So the only thing I need to know is when one of these owners goes to court and says, well, the assessor said I'm a X and the village says I'm a Y, that somebody understands how to define all of that.
This actually comes up far more frequently than you would think. Where and we get it a lot because we get people who say the property is being sold or offered as a three-family.
Correct.
It's assessed as a three-family. But we don't have we don't, not in that zone. It never is. This happens a lot. For purposes, if someone were to go to court and make that argument, they'd lose because it's how the building department views the property. It's not how the assessor views the property.
Mhm.
But this
And you
has
could
been
get the
done-
assessor to maybe rethink, but then you're illegally living somewhere because
we
you
do-
now have a building that's not.
We have requested on occasion, we do request that sometimes properties have to be reclassified by the assessor. And that does happen on occasion where the property is just wrong. But where it becomes a far bigger problem for us, particularly when someone is selling their home and they
Yes.
think they're selling it as a 2, and we suddenly go, no, it's really a 1, and we don't know what. And then in fairness to the homeowner, they've been paying taxes at, let's say, a higher assessed rate. But
And in fairness to the homeowner, they've also been living in a 2-family. They're paying for exactly how they're using it, actually.
but in any event, this issue has,
Okay, look,
Comes up all the time,
it's over 200 years old, this community. Every couple of decades, housing changes, formats change. It's not surprising that cumulatively, I was in a house that was built in the 1850s. There's just no way that when that was built and then when it was sold, that it could be so easily adjusted to today's standards. If it were a new construction, that would be a different issue. So, I get it. We're trying to bring all these buckets
Yeah.
into one lane on a highway, like instead of multi-lane and because it's hard to work with this. We all know that this is like a bear of a project. I'm sort of happy we're taking it on, but I'm just bringing up some tangential
No, and
questions
I think those are
that I
great
think,
questions.
we might, if we can solve some of these things.
Right,
Or at
absolutely.
least make them publicly knowledgeable that, somebody says, oh, I shouldn't be paying that much tax as well, but you've got 2 families living there, so why shouldn't you be paying? So some of this is just definitions. Okay, so
So just back to the tables,
yes, ma'am.
the one last thing that we for the third set of tables, which is the C tables or parking requirement tables. Again, we combined the tables to reduce the number of tables. We also added parking requirements for non-residential uses in the PO district. Because
What's the
previously
PO again? I'm
it's
sorry.
the professional office district.
Right, okay.
And that the professional office district did not have, it only had parking requirements for residential uses, but not non-residential uses. So that has been changed as well. So those are the changes that we made for the parking requirements.
How was it changed?
So before there were not, for some reason, I guess when the zoning was adopted, in 2009, the PO, which is the professional office, only had zoning requirements for the residential uses, but not the commercial uses.
I heard what you said. That's
Yes, so
what kind of parking? I have a professional office. So what kind of parking do I have today that I'll have tomorrow?
well, so the in the professional office building, professional office, they allow for various commercial uses. So it varies, but like, for example, in office uses general is 1 space per 400 square feet of floor area, which is very similar to our other non-residential districts. In the PO district, you actually have numerous like you're allowed to have daycare centers, educational uses, you're allowed to have artesian workspace, general offices. You're also allowed to have like doctor's offices. So it's more of an office use than like retail uses, but we did provide those parking requirements similar to other non-residential districts for office uses. And that was one of the requests from the building department because of the lack of not having that identified was problematic.
How many professional office usage zones do we have in the village?
You have one, which
That's
is,
what I thought.
yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, I thought we only had one area, but okay. Got it.
Okay, so then some of the other adjustments we're proposing, it's just some clarifying some language in dealing with when referring to the comprehensive plan and New York State Village law. We're also proposing, and I'll get to the definitions last, We're just proposing I list all the zoning districts in the section called List of Zoning Districts. So now it includes the two new overlays from your form-based code, which is the Downtown Overlay District and Croton Avenue Overlay District. We're also proposing as part of this, one of the things with the district boundaries is we have a couple properties that actually cross. You have a property that has a dividing line between two zoning districts going across the property. And before, the zoning chapter did not really identify how to handle that. And so now we are proposing to actually have language in there where it clearly states that if you happen to have a property where there's district boundary that divides the property, that more than 50% of the area that lies in the less restricted district, the regulations should follow the less restricted district as opposed to the more restricted district.
Why the opposite?
So we have in cases where, it says in all other cases where district boundary divides a lot in one ownership and more than 50% of the area of such ownership lies in the less restricted district, the regulations prescribed in this chapter for the less restricted district shall apply to the such portions of the more restricted portion which lies within 30 feet of the district boundary. And I think the purpose of that was that we have a lot of these districts where there is the split is usually commercial versus residential. So, I mean, if the board wants to allow for the, well, and so the less restricted district allows more flexibility than the more restricted district.
To me, because obviously New York State usually, if it's a requirement, it is one and or the other, like in an office space, usually go to the highest, sure,
Right,
to
the
the
more
higher
restricted.
more restricted than anything else.
Right.
I guess in this particular case, dependent, because I don't think there's that many units or that many.
There's not that many
No,
properties.
not that many properties, correct? And
No.
you said mainly is the overall will be more on the commercial end.
Right, so the couple that I know of are located along like Croton Avenue. And I think there might be a couple along Route 9. It's
Oh.
those types of.
I'll be okay with the 50% with that letter restricted on that one, yeah. Just because there's not too many overalls, but again, that's just my opinion. I'm
Right.
not sure what the rest of the board feels like.
I'm fine with, I mean, good, so.
And we can, and I'll just make a note just to check, make sure that we really are only talking about a handful of properties.
Yeah, please. And I guess that one of the things that I neglected to ask on this whole process, and I know there's a lot of people involved, and I thank you for everyone that has been involved in this process. But some of this stuff, forgive me if you guys have, has the chair of the zoning board or the planning board sort of being in the loop in some of this stuff? Because sometimes things have come out from their end to address some of the stuff that they may have seen that is like a common thing or common topic that comes in front of them that they maybe in some of these changes that you're doing or you guys are working on it could be implemented. It just could be tweaked or clarified in that same sense.
So that's a good question. So the original list, I believe, came from issues that were taking place at the zoning board and planning boards, because the original list was actually generated by.
But have they been
Joe.
involved now?
So they haven't been involved now. That's kind of the next step. So once the village board is comfortable with this, then we'll go back for their review and recommendation. It's required to do it to for the planning board to provide a recommendation, but if you'd like us to also send it to the zoning board, we can do that as well.
It would be
Yeah.
for me would be
I think
appropriate
that's
for
a
that.
good
Absolutely.
point. So it's you, it's Stuart, it's Maddie. Who else put this together?
Um,
Building department, I heard.
Yeah, Joe, and then
Base.
Linda Whitehead
Whitehead,
also
sorry.
helped
Right.
with the list, the original list.
Okay, right. So you will have to take it. Do you think Stuart, the EAC, Kate should look at it too?
Not yet, because there's nothing in 270 that
Will affect
directly
them,
deals
sure.
with
Okay.
that. We haven't gotten to that part, but none of the
She
definitions
just,
really.
I mean, I just know that she's actually excellent in reading through detailed information as
Right.
well. And sometimes people catch single words that change the meaning.
Right.
So if it doesn't hurt, I would suggest a wider net, always better than a smaller net, if she has the time, obviously not to hold any.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, a couple more. So another section that we're proposing to make tweaks to is the non-conforming uses. This is specifically dealing with clarifying the time period for which a use is considered discontinued. And this really has to do with, right now, the zoning chapter says if a non-conforming use or a portion thereof substantially ceases for any reason for a total of 6 months during any 12 months, or is changed to a conforming use for any period of time, any future use of the land, building, or structure shall be in conformity with this chapter. What we're proposing, because this language was always, I think, especially Linda, who's the planning board attorney, thought that this language was very confusing. And so we're just proposing to say, if a non-conforming use or portion thereof substantially ceases for any reason for a total of 12 months, or is changed to a conforming use for any period of time. So instead of the 6 months during any 12-month period, we're just going to say 12 months. So that's the only change for that.
I always thought it was 12 months.
Yeah.
So therefore, no change for you.
Enforcement. So we are changing, we're actually eliminating a lot of the enforcement provisions. This is specifically because there is duplications that are found in chapter 162, which is your housing, property maintenance, and building code administration. So basically what this is we're just, instead of the duplication, we are removing the enforcement provisions that are duplicated from the zoning chapter. They will remain in chapter 162. And we are, though, still keeping penalties within the zoning chapter specifically for zoning violations of the zoning chapter itself.
So I have a silly question on that one. Because pretty much it's like you're crossing everything out
Yes,
except for 270-46.
yes.
Can we just renumber that?
Oh, yeah, no, it's all going to be renumbered. That's part of the
Okay.
whole local
Got it.
law, right?
Okay.
That's why I was saying we're not ready to just send this off.
All
Okay, then the next large section it's actually really the Article 10, which is planning board conditional uses and site plan review. For the most part, we're keeping everything as is, but we are making a couple minor changes. And this really clarifies to the performance bond requirements, as well as site plan expirations again. So for the performance bond, it's just really clarifying a little bit more about that the village engineer needs to review and approve along with the corporation council. And then what we are suggesting to do with the site plan, again, similar to what we just talked about in the subdivision, there was basically a mandatory expiration for site plan, and then you had to come back for a new site plan approval. And what we are recommending is to change this so that the planning board may extend site plan approval in 1-year increments if it is in the opinion such extension is warranted by the particular circumstances involved. Part of the expirations went back. I mean, now we're talking from like 2009. And if you recall, during that time period, there was a lot of people buying properties, holding on to properties, or getting the site plan approvals and then trying to flip the properties.
Still going on.
Right. It is still going on, but there was
It's going on even more than
Right.
it was.
but there was a real situation where people were getting their site plan approvals and not doing anything to the properties. So that's where I think a lot of the initial expirations were, to try to force people to actually, come to the table who are really interested to
Mhm.
develop. But what has taken place over time, because there's more of like, there's more permitting, things are taking longer in certain circumstances to be able to ready to start moving forward with development, that these expirations are now becoming onerous on somebody that's looking to redevelop or work on their property.
And how is it preventing people from doing what we just described?
So it does allow for, the planning board so they have the discretion to permit the extensions. However, if they feel that a particular property owner is not moving forward, or, you know, maybe that they're just holding on to the property, but, you know, at that point, the planning board doesn't have to give the extension. So a lot of times the applicants that are coming before the boards where they do warrant the extension are waiting for permits to be issued or other.
And how many
approvals.
extensions? do you
So
want?
this one can, I mean, none of them have, they're just in 1-year increments. So the planning board at some point could say, you know what, you've been before us like a number of years and nothing's moving forward. You have no reasons, really valid reasons. We are going to tell you to reapply for site plan approval.
Okay, so I'm sort of asking a question, but I'm not
Mhm.
really asking a question. Think of it a little more like a rhetorical question. So let me rephrase. Let's put end dates on things, because we've got too many people buying stuff and pretending they're doing stuff so they could sell it at a profit and the land just sits there. Could be either put to better use, or it's the reason why so many places won't allow investors to buy co-ops.
Right.
Because they don't take care of, people do not take care of properties historically, not everybody, when they're using it for investments as they would if they actually lived there.
Right.
So I'd like to see some sort of end date to this, not just at the discretion of a volunteer board that where people change and this and that. And we've just been through too many of these. And so I'd like an end dates on this, unless somebody tells me why we shouldn't have one.
I agree with that. I just think that we have too many, I guess, for what we're talking about, like extensions. We just have to, I guess, Valerie, you're gonna have to make sure that all this is timely,
Right.
accurately to what we have. Obviously, with the timetable of zoning board approvals, how many extensions do they have? How many extensions can they get? And I think I agree with the mayor. Is like it should be, for argument's sake, an extension of 6 months or 3 months, and then after that we can give you another extension, but then that's it, and then everything goes back to square one, more or less. I mean, it's very similar to what we have. I want to have a concrete number for the board, pretty much, and I think that will be helpful.
Okay, so right now, the current zoning allows the applicant that upon request, the planning board may grant an extension for a period not to exceed 1 year, and there should be there shall be up to 2 extensions that may be granted for a total time period of all extensions taken together for no more than 2 years. So it was 2 years. Now, we could, if we want to provide an end date, allow instead of 2 years to,
Get 1
right, so you get one.
Another
then-
extension,
and
that's
then you
2
can,
years.
right, and then you get another one, so it's 3 years, basically.
3 years.
Yes. So we could, if you wanted to allow for,
Long, and and then it's like, at the last due date, and then they get 18 months because there's just too much of that going on.
so I mean, if
It's
you
so
want, we,
densely populated already, the people buy land and they just let it sit there and rot.
But I have a question. Are we finding that they are getting the full, because it's up to,
right.
right? Are they getting the full 12 months every
Yes,
time?
they are.
Every time is the full 12
Yes.
months. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, we could keep this one as it is currently, the 3 years, but then allow for the subdivision, which the subdivision was a little bit, that tends to take longer just because of all the different agencies that have to sign off for a
Okay,
subdivision.
That's where the
I'm
problem
okay with the
is.
subdivision
Yeah.
concept, but with this whole process, I think it's different, unless it's, after you get the subdivision approvals and then you just hold on to the property.
Right.
Because you can do that as well. My feeling, 3 years is a lot, but again, that's just my personal take.
So we can keep it as is, which is technically the 3 years.
But you
Unless-
guys all wanted to change it. So what was the reason again for changing it?
The recommendation to change it was because the planning board was, both the building inspector as well as the planning board attorney were finding that, people were like basically the 3 years were expiring and they were having to come in for reapprovals.
Yes, but the 3 years are expiring because they're sitting on it,
Yeah,
not because they were doing work and couldn't get material.
Yeah, I just think that, maybe what we can change is, if you haven't done anything in 3 years, you have to start all over again. You cannot just go back for reapprovals.
So if during that first year, just for the sake, on the 11th month, you show that you did X, Y, and Z, you'd be in okay shape, right? Because you did actual work.
Right.
I don't know
The
if.
way that's written, it doesn't speak to that.
No, because,
basically.
hold on, no, because that's a little bit different, because soon as you do something, that means you pull a building permit.
Right.
And that means you did something, and that kicks the 18 months for a
Right, that's the
commercial
difference,
portion.
goes down the
Right.
difference.
But see, if they don't do anything for 18 months, they have to start all over again. There's no extensions at that point for any of the approvals.
And if they didn't come to the board after like the first year, they would have to come before the first year expires and asking for an extension and explaining why they're looking for an
Yeah.
extension.
But that's in front of which board?
Planning board,
And they can do that twice.
they can do that right
The
twice.
first year is a given,
Right,
and they go in and say, what's my
Right.
favorite? Oh, material got expensive, right? And then it's, so I didn't do anything. And then there's another one after,
right,
and then the building sits there.
right.
Okay, any comment? I'd like it like tightened up. That's what I would like, based on what I'm seeing. Not in other municipalities, not in upstate New York, not in the Bronx, in our area. Based on what I'm seeing, I'd like it tightened up. Does anybody object to that? Because I think they're going, the purpose of today's meeting is to give direction here of which way we want to go. So I'd like it tightened up. I don't have an exact wording for you, but I think you get my point. here.
At that point, I mean, if your suggestion is just to keep it as a 3 years.
Right, I would
Then it's
say,
just keep
right.
it at 3 years. I mean, I would keep it less, me
So I
personally.
heard you. That's
So-
why I'm trying to go here to see if there's any opinion.
Is
on
your
that.
characterization of the current context that you are finding that property owners are sitting on the properties, milking the extension to the 3 years, and that's the problem to be solved, or is it something else?
So I think in the past, it was, I mean, there are always property owners that will sit on their property, right? That's never gonna change. The couple scenarios that the planning board has come across, I think a lot of it has been, they got their approvals, then they're trying to get the financing and just things got delayed. That being said, 3 years I mean, it's not like you're not necessarily having things expire after 1 year or 2 years. You are giving 3 years. So if the board wanted to continue with the 3 years, I wouldn't say that that's overly restrictive,
Yeah, okay.
but removing that 2 years would allow for more flexibility if that was the direction the board wanted to move.
Manny? Keep it as is.
I,
Or you want to tighten?
I'm wanting less.
You want to do 2 years?
Yeah, I want more like 2 years.
Financing is probably. You can't get financing till you get some of the paperwork in.
It couldn't take a year. It usually, for argument's sake, a complex project is probably gonna take them a year, sure. That's what usually, more or less, let's say it takes them a year. By the time you do that, you should be working on the finance, or at least have an idea of what is gonna happen then. If you're gonna finance, it all depends. I mean, if we're gonna be doing, because if it's a partnership, then they have to figure that out. If it's a state fund, then they have to figure that out before they even go in front of the boards. So to me, because it's the finance, that's just an excuse. I will prefer it to be 2 years.
I mean, I think, it's to secure a building permit. So, I mean, I think if the board wants to move forward with 2 years, let me just double check on a couple of things, because like, for example, like the DPW site, right? That's potentially gonna have to go through cleanup first. So if like the cleanup doesn't necessarily trigger a building permit, then you potentially have this project having to go back for site plan approval again. So those are the kind of things that I just want to make sure that if we reduce it to like 2 years, that you don't potentially have like your larger complex projects start coming.
How about you create some sort of exemptions? That solves, if you fall under those exemptions, under those criterias, then you don't have to look up anything additional. Sure, you just put the criterias overall itself and as an exemption at that point. And if you
Right.
meet those 3 criterias or whatever, just like for now, just like you get the parking waivers, sure, from the planning board. Again, for now, as long as you meet those 3 criterias, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So for me, will be if we wanted to look into something like this, let's create some exemptions. Again,
So
that's just my
So
opinion.
here's what I'm hearing. You got the 3 years, it stays as is. If you can tighten it up in some way.
Okay.
Exemptions start being, the more words you add, the whole process here is to consolidate all the words. So I am loath to add, but let's look, we're to 2 years, 3 years. How about 2.5 years? I'm leaving it to you guys. Think about the problem is the problem that we're having. You don't change codes for a developer because we know we have a development, we don't change to suit that. On the other hand, if you do for one developer, how could you say no to another? So that's why this is a little bit of walking on a very narrow balance beam, but we're throwing it back at you. You get the idea.
Yeah.
It's gotta be, this is like not too wide, not too narrow. I don't know, maybe it's 2.5 years, maybe it's 2 years and a quarter. I don't know. Come up with something
Sure.
that's the goal here.
Okay.
I don't think we have to micro the exact months and exact exemption, but just see what you can do. And if you can't, then we leave it the same. If that's the best, and that's the goal here is to let the chairs and everybody know, we don't want these people sitting on it or buying things, pretending they have the money, getting a couple of permits and then flipping it to some, new person who plays around with us again.
Mayor, just to keep in mind, I just want to be clear. We're talking here about extending site plan approval. Once they get the building permit, then it's a whole different
Understand.
calculation of time.
I understand.
So it's not the
It's
same
like,
thing.
These are all chunks in the process.
Well, no,
Fred.
but the timing is different.
Right.
So that's because once it gets to that, Joe has a lot more discretion in
Understood.
terms of the building permit being extended as compared to when you get to that stage.
Right. Understood. I think, to be fair, in a rising interest rate, it will be more difficult for people to line up, and it just takes longer. In a declining interest rate, it's much easier to get financing. So
All right, I'll look
Let's see
into
what
it
we
and
can
I'll
do.
come back with some suggestions.
what else you got?
All right, well, the last section is the meatiest of all the sections, and that deals with the definitions. So we did a couple things. One, in the packet I provided you, we are suggesting some new definitions. The new definitions would either replace older definitions that are no longer like applicable to, like, for example, like changes that have taken place in land use since, this was adopted in 2009. And then the other thing that we did do was look at, there were a couple other sections within the zoning chapter that technically had definitions in it. And so to avoid any other confusions, we moved everything that's technically a definition into the definition section. So those are the ones that are in blue. So we're not proposing any changes to those. We're just moving them from one particular section from the zoning chapter to another. But the new text, and what I'm going to do, instead of going through each and every, I'm just going to list the definitions that we proposed. I mean, just the actual word. And if there's a particular definition you'd like me to dive further into, I'm happy to do so. So we did add a new definition to accessory structure and accessory use. A bar, basement, bed and breakfast, boarding house or room.
What's a bed and breakfast?
Yeah, so bed and breakfast, what we did was we updated that, and it specifically is an owner occupied residence used to provide lodging and accommodations and a morning meal to visitors for compensation, provided that the owner lives on the premise and with no more than 9 guest rooms that are rented for temporary sleeping accommodations at market rates with a maximum length of stay of 14 consecutive nights. And then some or
And
all.
how do you define owner on a bed and breakfast?
So it's basically the owner of the building. It would be the owner of record.
And can a corporation or a limited liability, an LLP, be an owner?
Technically, yes, they could. You know, I mean, when you start dealing with owner occupied anything, it gets a little bit like a little bit more difficult in terms of, you know, enforcement. But for the most part, it would be, you know, the building department would know who owned the property and that either somebody of the LLC would have to be living on that property.
Okay, so I'd like that tied up because
Okay.
the jump from bed and breakfast to a boarding house
Yeah.
that is 14 days and everybody is related to somehow everybody and we
Right.
can't figure out who really owns because they live in another country
Right.
is getting on my nerves.
Okay.
So like I know we threw a lot in there, but you know exactly what I'm saying.
Yep.
So we need to tighten that up because these are really, you know, in New Hampshire, population 320 and some 20-mile radius is one thing. Here with prices in New York and people coming and going. That needs to be better defined, and ownership is a real problem. We have too many owners who say that they live on the premises but actually don't, and we're not able to prove that. So we have to be able to prove things that we ask for. If we can't have it.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I don't, these limited liability and the person's in Florida. And I got a call yesterday, if I live in Florida for 51%, because I'm saving taxes. Aren't I still the primary resident of my place in Austin? I'm like, I somehow think that's exactly not what you are, because actually you're living somewhere else 51% of the time. But I'm not a lawyer. I don't know, but we have a lot of that here.
Yes.
And so we need, again, it's about our community. And I'm sure there are other places in Westchester. So I know what a bed and breakfast is, but we have to define it better before it becomes a rooming house. So people actually have to have at least one kitchen and they have to actually prepare breakfast in a bed and breakfast.
Yes.
Pretty much, and just to piggyback on that, the
Airbnb.
Airbnbs, that's not permitted, sure.
Right. So you do not have a short-term rental law on the books.
Mhm.
So that's why.
So that is something that if the village was interested in looking at, you can do that. That's where you really regulate the Airbnbs.
I'll be interested in looking at something like
So the
that.
apps,
We have people doing Airbnbs in this village,
Right.
of course we do.
So,
'cause you're
right,
finding
but we
out-
have no law on the
There's
books.
no law, correct?
So the absence of a law allows people to do it. How does that work?
No,
Oh, I don't know why I'm
I'll
looking to you.
I'll look at our corporation.
There are certain districts where this is why you, I'm sorry.
Everybody's getting hurt here today.
So can I
Like, what's
tell you?
happening?
There are certain districts where you can't do it because in terms of living space and things like that. If you don't have, if you want to call it an Airbnb law, if you don't have something like that, basically you don't have a violation that you can write because, people.
There's no
can do that.
enforcement. You won't be able to enforce
But
it.
the argument would be is that it's not a family that's living, we sort of get into what is the definition of what's a household, what's a family, and we have that, in here now. But as Valerie is certainly aware, many municipalities have been passing, these type of things.
Well, all of New York City.
Well, New York City, but you're seeing, Beacon's done it, a lot of other
Well,
municipalities.
it's creating,
do it.
so I just for the record, we should not be referring to this as Airbnb. That actually is the name of a company and it's not, they're not liable. It's not them. It's more of the way you're describing it, which is short term, because tomorrow it'll be ABC Rug Company. Like, let's not say anything about a company.
I just
that-
forgot the term short terms.
Yeah, no, but I
Something.
want to do it on the record and I don't want people.
correct.
And
But it
it's
is.
not fair to them.
But it is certainly something to look at. We had a circumstance, I think, 18 months to 2 years ago, where someone asked if they could actually do it.
Right.
And we wrote back and said no, because within that particular zoning district, there was language that we could use that basically said you could not do that. It was not zoned for that. But a tighter short-term rental law would be better
Mhm.
than just essentially, relying, because if we go into court and the court says, well, you don't have it, then, you're opening up a floodgate and you can just have people advertise
Right, because I think
without worry.
what aside from the aggressive landlords and management companies in the city, especially in Manhattan, from what they're doing, which is basically showing up at 2 a.m, throwing the people out and saying, it doesn't matter to us, it's illegal. Short of being nasty about it, I think we have to have something on the books. And part of it could be, you could do short term, but it has to be a minimum of 6 months to the same member of the family or family. So you don't go, well, it was this guy, now it's this woman, they have to be married to one another. This is like a game you never win.
You want to do it stricter because I think it's 30 days.
I'm throwing out an idea.
I don't
not-
mind the
yeah.
60 days,
Uh,
believe me.
6 months. Manhattan has
six
passed-
months.
Many of the
Yeah.
buildings have passed 6 months minimums, where people could because condos technically were able to rent it. And what they've done to assure that there is is to say you have to do at least a 6 month rental or you're in big trouble. So that's how they got rid of that. The point is, we haven't really fully discussed it, but since we're having discussion about codes, and this is one of those things, and I don't think it's like an overwhelming problem. We have bigger problems. But since we're talking about it, I think this is something that needs to be
Well,
further discussed.
it is an issue because you have parking issues, you have trash issues, you have maintenance issues, you have
We have a
lot.
lot, you have a lot of issues. I'm just saying for today's
For
meeting.
today's meeting, it's not there, but it's,
Because
but
we
it's
as a
part of
group
it.
of 5 people really haven't had a discussion
Correct.
about this, but that is the point of today, is to give direction.
Sure.
I would say tangentially, the short-term rental, you all need to come up with a recommendation for us. If you need more direction, you might
No.
want to come
Right.
back on this.
That'll be separate from zoning, but it will be, it'll be
Right.
sort of
Part of the
an
definition.
adjunct.
So
Yeah.
There
I'm
are a
calling
number of-
these tangential
Yes.
issues
Right.
that need to be addressed, in short term.
Right, and we will, and if what I can do, there are a number of different decisions that any municipality can make for short-term rentals, so I can, similar to what we did with the cannabis, we can bring back the list, kind of like a little bit of like options, and then we
Right.
can have another discussion on it, and we can start putting something together.
Yeah, and it's all about what you're saying. It has nothing to do with why can't you let people make money on their property? That's not what we're objecting
Right.
to. It is all the other stuff, and parking is a huge parking noise and how people treat properties that aren't theirs. And all the other stuff, how to get rid of someone we start getting involved in that won't leave and all that stuff. So let's move on, but
Okay.
that's a tangential that hopefully comes out of this.
Sure.
I do want to say something that trustee that Manny had said, which is it might even be a nice to do, not a must do, but it might be nice to contact a couple of people who sat on zoning and planning a number of years ago and show them some of this stuff. Just, the lawyer's been around for a while, but they work in other municipalities. I know it might take time. If you feel it takes too much time or they don't want to do it, that's fine. I'm not, just for their input, a word here and a word there, because they might have been chairs for a number of years. Might just have more input from the people who sat close to it for a number of years would be a nice to do. They mostly live in this community. Unless there's some legal reason that, we can't do it.
Right,
Good
so
idea.
I'm gonna just continue with,
Please.
again, similar, so we updated boarding house and
Mm-hmm.
rooming house. Building, cellar. Certificate of appropriateness.
What's the seller?
Cellar definition is a portion of a building having more than half of its interior height below grade plane
Right,
and a
okay.
clearance of less than 6
Versus a
feet.
basement, got it.
Right.
Okay, just.
We've updated the definition of a comprehensive plan, conditional use, dormitory.
What is the conditional use?
Conditional use is a land use that is allowable in a particular zoning district, subject to conditional approval by the planning board based on a review of the potential adverse impacts of the use and any appropriate mitigations to minimize those impacts on nearby properties.
What was the difference between the definition that you have now versus the definition that we
I
had
don't think it
before?
was ever defined.
Defined, really? Zoning board always looks at the conditional uses.
So,
Okay, got it.
Parts of it are fascinating.
all right, so, the definition of dormitory, We also updated the definitions of dwelling, single-family detached, single-family attached, two-family.
What's the biggest difference
dwellings.
between those two?
Yeah, so the single-family detached is a residential building used for one dwelling unit on a single lot that is not attached to any other dwelling unit through shared side or rear walls, floors, or ceilings, or corner points. And then a single-family attached is a single-family dwelling unit that is in a single structure with another single-family dwelling units. Each dwelling unit must be separated from the others by a fire-rated vertical common party wall running from the foundation to the roof of the building and have its own individual entry to an outdoor sidewalk or walkway without the need to pass through a lobby or shared use area of the structure.
What is the difference between that and a townhome?
So the townhomes were actually, those are the single family, I'm sorry, there's not, because then the last sentence is this definition includes dwellings commonly referred to as row houses, side by side townhouses. Each dwelling unit must be on its own individual lot.
Got it.
So for example, on Ellis Place, there are a couple of houses that are one structure with two very distinct separate doors, separate dwelling units. So would that be something that would fall under
So
this?
that's interesting that you brought that up.
Some
and
might
that
call
was-
it a duplex, but some might not. I don't
Right,
know.
so this is where we spent a lot of time working on this
We have a
definition.
lot of
This
those
goes,
all over the village.
this goes to two-family dwellings. So here's the little slightly difference in the definition. So a two-family is a residential building containing two dwelling units on a single lot. So each dwelling unit in a two-family dwelling is completely separated from the other by an unpierced wall dividing the two units side to side, back to front, or by an unpierced ceiling and floor extending from the exterior wall to the exterior wall, except for a stairwell exterior to one of the dwelling units. So basically, you can have what you're just describing, that based almost what we were calling like a townhome, can be on a two-family as well, because it's one structure on a single lot. The difference between that and the attached single family is that there's actually a property dividing line between the party walls. So it's really just a small minor change between the two. One is two dwelling units on one single property. The other one is individual dwelling units.
Where the lot ends at the wall,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, but in that case,
Hours and hours.
Yes,
and
it was a
hours.
lot.
I
to
was gonna
simplify
say-
that, thanks.
I was gonna say, well, Mark Twain had this thing that writing
Who had a hair, I had no beard.
Yeah.
Now look what happened.
I was gonna say that
Great.
Mark Twain has a great, is credited with saying that, writing a novel is one thing, writing a short story takes forever.
Yes.
So, but in
No,
that
it's
case,
tough.
I don't think, I think that's great. I think that clarifies a lot of the stuff. I just don't see that based on our geography and in our lots. I mean, I haven't seen our mapping lately, but I don't think anywhere in our village right now will have an option to do something like that anymore, because you still have to meet your setbacks.
So you could, and you can easily meet your setbacks by having.
It has to be a big lot
Right.
or
it would-
narrow building.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Spring, don't we have?
No, but as a new
As a
project,
new,
as a
yes.
new, I think is very difficult to do something like that, just to have habitable spaces onto both of these units. As existing, we have a bunch of them all over the village, and I get that. I just don't think that if an empty lot, for example, be able to meet these criterias.
I mean, well, they technically could if it's a larger lot,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, definitely. I mean, because this only will fall under more or less in a T zone for
Yes.
two family. This
Right.
does not refer to, well, let me ask you a silly question. What happens if I'm in a multifamily and I want to build a three family? Can I have a sort of like a duplex on one side and then a single on another side?
So, and technically the multifamily definition is a building or portions of a building located on a single lot containing three or more dwelling units.
So it doesn't matter the configuration.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
got it.
So that's where a lot of it was very, we had to double check and triple check these definitions, because one of the difficulties, the prior two-family definition only referred to separated by vertical or horizontal partitions and not by a party wall. But the difficulty was that we were running into situations where it didn't really allow for all types of two-family structures.
Thank you.
The whole point of this exercise is to, I love when you say technically, this whole thing is technically. Like every word is technically. So, I mean, it's to look at the past, the present, and also the future. We don't know exactly what everything will look like. And it's supposed to make it easier for the boards, for the residents, for the businesses, for the judges, for the cops, for everybody that like everybody who reads this before they move here, once they live here, we're trying to simplify the language in a sense. I think that we're moving in the right direction here by doing even that. Next.
All right, so then we also updated entertainment or recreation uses, both indoor and outdoor. Then here's a big one. We updated the definition of family. So
Oh, I am so excited. Go ahead.
this one is a very long definition. So I know we wanted to simplify, but in reality, what we did was we actually made this one a little bit more, not complicated, but we added more flexibility to how a family gets defined. This is based on the city of Poughkeepsie's definition of family. This was upheld in the courts for this definition. So we
Oh,
wanted
let's
to-
hear it. It's longer.
Yes. So family, one of the following: 1, 2, or 3 persons occupying a dwelling unit, or 4 or more persons occupying a dwelling unit and living together as a traditional family or functional equivalent of a traditional family. B, it shall be presumptive evidence that 4 or more persons living in a single dwelling unit who are not related by blood, marriage, or legal adoption do not constitute the functional equivalent of a traditional family. In determining whether individuals are living together as a functional equivalent or of a traditional family, the following criteria must be present. The group is one in which, in theory, size, appearance, structure, and function resembles a traditional family unit. The occupants must share the entire dwelling unit and live and cook together as a single housekeeping unit. A unit in which the various occupants act as separate roomers may not be deemed to be occupied by a functional equivalent of a traditional family. The group shares expenses for food, rent, or ownership costs, utilities, and other household expenses. The group is permanent and stable. Evidence of such permanency and stability may include the presence of a minor dependent children regularly residing in the household or enrolled in local schools. Members of the household have the same address for purposes of voter registration, driver's licenses, motor vehicle registration, and filing of taxes. Members of the households are employed in the area. The household has been living together as a unit for a year or more, whether in the current dwelling unit or other dwelling units. There's common ownership of furniture and appliances among the members of the household, and the group is not transient or temporary in nature. And then the 5, whether any other factor reasonably related to whether or not a group is the functional equivalent of a family. That is the definition.
How is this changed from the former
Well,
definition?
the former definition was also based on, I can tell you that was also based off an attorney general opinion at the time, which was 1 or more persons, whether or not related by blood or marriage, living and eating together as a single housekeeping unit and sharing common expenses and household tasks. But since then, I think a number of communities have had additional issues with what gets defined as a family in terms of like code enforcement. And so they have expanded the definition to clarify some of this a little bit more. And this is the
Is there a
definition.
maximum number of adults that can live as relatives?
Well, just in general, not as a relative.
This says 4,
Right.
I said this has 4.
because this could affect, we have nonprofits that create transitional housing. We have group homes.
Should be okay.
Right.
Group homes would be fine because they would come within one of the subclassifications of a definition here, because it's essentially a stable and they're all sharing the same area, pretty much.
But it's limited to 4 people.
Yeah, that's what I think my.
Used to be
trouble
5.
is-
didn't
It
it?
it says one or, well, it says one of the following, 1, 2, or 3 persons occupying a dwelling unit, or 4 more persons occupying a dwelling unit and living together as a traditional family or the functional equivalent of a traditional family.
It can be more than 4.
Right.
There's no limit on how much more than 4.
Well, there'd be a limit by the size of the units. So there,
Right,
you know,
okay.
each unit, you can only have a certain number of
If you
people
have
who could
3
be in.
bedrooms, you can only have so many adults. Is that correct?
Yes,
Right, so so they do in the definition, it does say it shall be presumptive evidence that 4 or more persons living in a single dwelling unit who are not related by blood, marriage, or legal adoption do not constitute the functional equivalent of a traditional family. But then the next section is in determining whether individuals are living together as a functional equivalent of a traditional family, the following criteria must be present. So basically, the building department could say, we're going to use presumptive evidence that we see a house of like 10 individuals living together, and we have concerns that this is not a traditional family unit. And then the people living within the household would say, yes, but we fall under these other criteria, and so we are a traditional family unit.
Okay.
because we now, for example, already have in the code, if there are 3 mailboxes, the presumption is it's a 3-family house, or if there's 3 meters. Now,
Or 3
now,
discs or 3 this.
that's
or
right,
3
but
that.
that can be defeated if you go to court, because it's not a definitive presumption, but it's just a presumption.
Right.
So here it's sort of the same thing, but again, the importance of the definition here is that it's been reviewed by an appellate court and found to be, that they approved it.
Right, so you went with that. Okay.
Right, so, if for some reason, like just Sue was saying, if the building department went in with presumptive evidence saying you're not a family, this definition now gives like 5 other options of, yes, we are, because we, in theory, this one group in size, structure, and function resembles a family unit. Or yes, because we share household expenses for rent, ownership, utilities, and other household expenses.
They'd have to
So
prove that.
they would just provide the evidence for that.
Can you define traditional?
We all knew that was coming. It's just a matter of
Right,
who was.
so I think, you mean in terms of, do you want a definition within the zoning as traditional, or?
I mean, the thing is that I get what it's alluding to, but that's also a word that's been used specifically to
Right.
say a traditional marriage, for example,
I
is one
understand what
man,
you're
one
saying.
woman.
Right,
So why, I understand that we're using this exact language,
So-
because that's what passed the appellate, but I don't know those appellate people. And so I'm
right, so
asking,
we could look at, we can even look at removing the word traditional, right, if it has that connotation, and just say family, right, living together as a family, or the functional equivalent of a family. Okay,
I think you have to look at it, because I actually think the reason they put it is because you can't have 10 cousins and call that a family, right? Because we get a lot of cousins around here. So I think they kept alluding to traditional I'm not sure it's the male, female, it's the role of like spouses. You could have 2 men, but not cousins. There's a difference in like the way they're doing it. And it's very sensitive, because how do you actually sit there and prove any of this? So I think you should go back and see why they kept, it's like, here's traditional and everything's is going towards the traditional, but never really saying it has to be a man or a woman or a father and a mother. So I would suggest you go back
okay.
and look deeper at the.
because
at
you can
that
have, sorry, go ahead.
piece.
Yeah. Cause you can have like, you can have a single father, his brother-in-law, and a friend living in a house with the 2 twin daughters, and this is
Movie.
Full House.
Yeah, I was
This
gonna
is
say
Danny
that's-
Tanner, and this is like their arrangement. So like, are they a traditional family? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's
And I think it goes back to me and I agree with that, because the concept for me, well, this is not a college village, sure, but this, when you go out to college, roommates, you can rent a house. Does that fall on any of the, I think that falls under some of the categories when you're sharing some of the utilities.
Right,
sure.
exactly.
So exactly,
Right.
but it could be the same, it doesn't have to be cousins. If
No,
they
but-
fall under one of the
There
criteria.
doesn't seem to be a limit on it. Look, there can be,
I think the limit is in occupancy,
that's the real key.
but in that the occupancy is
Right.
based on
Like
the building department.
Right.
way in college
have that.
towns, they actually, just like they do in the Hamptons and all these other in the Jersey Shore, they actually put legislation in place to actually define.
Yeah.
For
I don't know.
example, in some
I agree.
college communities, you can't rent more than 11 months because they don't, because of the accommodations they make, they don't want you staying there 12 months because now you're just like a regular, So, but we're not that community.
Right.
That's the thing. But I would also look at maybe there was an extra explanation in the brief about what traditional referred to. That might be useful and might be legit. If it's one we don't like, then
Right,
we
we'll
have
look
to
into it.
maybe, do something with it. Because it very clearly used that as the central pole and everything is being pushed against it. And there must have been a reason for that.
We'll get back. All right, so another change we're proposing is just this I just want to highlight, we're proposing to eliminate the definition of habitable floor area and keep everything as livable floor area because it's caused so much confusion over
I
the
don't even know what
years.
the difference is, but.
Yeah,
okay.
so the difference is the habitable, basically, the habitable floor area excludes and like it does not include bathrooms, foyers, hallways as part of the overall square footage, minimum square footage per unit. Where livable floor area is the total usable space available within the perimeter of walls of all floors of buildings.
That's from the
including those.
interiors or from the interior. That's not
Right.
a gross.
Right.
That's a net.
Yes, thank you.
So, but that also only affects to some district. That's not throughout the village.
That would affect, so the difference in that is there are a couple zoning districts where one was habitable versus livable.
Mhm.
And so.
But it's
the-
not, my question is not throughout the village.
No,
It's
No.
just some sections
Correct.
on the village
Right.
that's being affected by that.
that's
And,
correct.
and I'm okay by removing that.
Well, the more we remove, the happier I'm gonna be.
I just think that, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
we are not changing the requirements on the square footage requirements, correct? Because
no,
we
we're just
are,
taking
we are,
the- we're just
we are
taking the
more
whistle
strict.
out.
Yeah, we are more strict than the state. Okay,
Yes.
and I'm okay with that.
You also said involved in this, I'm sorry for interrupting, is PACE.
Yes.
They
They
were
were
involved in
involved.
the initial stage. That's correct.
And are they gonna continue to be involved? Like what exactly was their?
So oh, yeah,
No, they're not involved any longer. Their contract is up. They did some of the initial, if you want to call it spade work for us with regard to this, going over some definitions and areas like that and develop the memos from which we're working on now. But we have not engaged them any further at this point.
And these were students or?
No, it's a graduate of their law school
Yeah.
who is in their land use, part of their land use program.
right, so-
I'd be interested also I just feel more input, especially like language and also people getting credit for the work that they did. I mean, I think we just have to document.
right,
Because
so they,
I'm appreciative of like different points of view, so.
right. They provided, what they provided us was like multiple definitions
Okay,
so what they did is they basically looked at a lot of different communities and identified multiple definitions for us to consider.
okay,
And then they basically handed it over to Stuart and I, where we then said, okay, this definition probably best fits the village of Ossining because of the circumstances that we're aware of.
Right.
And then that's when we went back to Joe to confirm on some of the, especially the ones where we had multiple different options.
I don't want you to hesitate to rehire if the person was good. Because I think having different lenses is helpful. Sometimes we just know our village really well.
Right.
And we sometimes create things because we have specific scenarios and sometimes having a third party who doesn't know is just helpful. It's not,
Right.
in the scheme of things, it's such. I mean, we're trying to fix something that's happened over decades or a
Right.
couple of decades, so this is all good. All right, let's
Okay.
keep going.
So funeral parlors was updated, home-based businesses, definition was updated.
The home-based businesses, can we go through that?
Yep. This one is an accessory use of a dwelling unit for commercial purposes that is more intensive than a home occupation. Examples of home-based businesses include physicians, doctors, dentists, lawyers, architects, engineers, designers, music teachers, hairdressers, teachers, licensed real estate and or insurance brokers, and other similar professional
Okay,
uses.
so I wanna, so if I may, this implies that the hairdresser is practicing hairdressing
Yes,
and has like a sink and blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. With remote working, I could be an engineer for a 10,000 person firm, but I'm working remotely. That's not actually referring to that.
that's correct.
So how did you guys include remote working? Does it change anything? Look, we talked about workers when we talked about parking. That the more, I think that Sue Donnelly mentioned it, the more that people work from home, the more they're leaving their car there for if they're going in Tuesdays and Thursdays, the other 3 days, the car is parked where normally there wouldn't have been a car parked. They would be down by the train station. So I'm trying to just wrap my head around remote working, which I think is going to be around for a couple more years at least.
This is something we have to look at because we have home occupation, but we also have another definition that deals with working at home as
I'd
well.
like you to just,
Right.
yeah, no joke, I actually read this on my couch,
Yes.
but like, there are certain points that sort of conceptually caught my
Right.
attention. I'm not giving you a solution, but I would
No,
like a little
understood.
bit more because it does affect parking. I don't know if it's, I mean, companies in New York are now asking people to come back, but even yet, 3 days instead of 2, maybe they'll go to 4 days. That still leaves not a full week. And when we design things, we assume we have 1,000 commuters. That's 1,000 cars not sitting, on Ellis Road.
Well, you also
whatever.
have the expansion of the gig economy. So regardless of whether employers are asking people, a lot more people are self-employed.
Exactly correct. And are you still working from home?
Mhm.
There we go. So, 100%, I think, so I think that will actually grow. So
No
just,
doubt.
I'm sorry. Did you say?
No, I said, I think that's
Yeah,
definitely
so if
the
we could
trend.
just look into
Sure.
that a little bit more, it would be
Sure.
appreciated.
All right, so then definition of hotel was updated. Light manufacturing, live work unit, lodging and lodging house, medical or dental clinic, motels and motor courts.
Medical dental
Yes.
clinic is different from a veterinarian clinic in what way?
This one is a facility for physicians, dentists, chiropractors, physical therapists, or other licensed healthcare practitioners to examine and treat persons of an outpatient basis.
And
So it's
what would be the
persons.
between that or do you have a different definition for vet?
For veterinary, we do. And that is related to specifically to animals. And let me just.
I must not have gotten to that, so that's fine.
And the difference is whether they're boarding the animals versus
Right.
if they're not.
Yes,
Which is not gonna be the case with humans, so I get that, and there's also probably some health department. Sort of thing, okay.
yeah, so we have two
So they should be
uses,
separated.
right? They're animal related use general, animal related use intensive, and that's where they're located.
Thank you. I don't think I got to that.
That one was a blue definition. That's probably why you might have looked over that one, because that was just moving that from one area.
Okay,
The other updated, permitted use was updated. Restaurant carry out, restaurant with drive-through and, retail and service uses sales oriented was updated. Senior living facilities was also updated. Special use permit, story was updated. Structure was updated. Tap room or tasting room, urgent care center. And that was it. Those were the
Thank you.
new definitions.
I do have, again, tangential. It's a conversation, Stuart, you and I had probably a year ago. I'd like to, so these are all things that define what is. It's not what isn't. What do I mean by that? So we have a few places that are supposed to be retail, a deli, a bar, a store, and they basically don't conduct that business like ever. They use it for storage, they use it for whatever. Are there laws in place that say that a retail store, a frontage store, must be used as retail for X number, or a commerce, if you're a vet, if you're a dog groomer, you can't just say you're a dog groomer, you actually have to be a dog groomer and you have to be open X number of hours or X number of days, so that these places don't call themselves something, but are actually doing none of that business and have no intention of ever doing that business. It's sort of like the negative of,
Right.
we have all these rules. If you were a dog groomer, what you do, what we don't have is, if you say you are, but you never really do that.
Well, we do a few, I mean, we do check, for example, if certain businesses require licenses, an esthetician and masseuses, we do require, the building department wants to see that license before they will actually,
It's not the same
I
thing.
understand what you're asking. We don't have anything, and we don't, and as you know, in terms of saying, well, if you're going to be a dog groomer, you got to be operate as a dog groomer for X period of time. We have had circumstances, particularly with a number of locations, where let's say the business occupancy is that it's a retail store, and suddenly you have retail check cashing, they're selling cigarettes at all within the same location. Those have been written up by the building department because for the different kinds of code violations. But in terms of what you're saying, Mayor, is something we probably have to look at, because that's not something we reference in the code at all.
Because it's the negative of something. It's the null set. We have 2 or 3 that, like, literally I get more complaints about them than anybody, and not because they're doing anything wrong, it's because they're doing nothing. That's really the issue. They are closed businesses. I guess they're used as storerooms for somebody. It's ugly, it's disgusting, and it's dirty. And businesses next to them are trying to run a business, and they're next to a place that has like cruded paper on the windows and all that. Some communities, not many, as I've discovered, do say that you have to be open at least 20 hours a week as that establishment. If you're a deli, you have to actually be a deli for 20 hours. You can't really force someone to open 5 days, because maybe they're not busy 5 days. Maybe they, like some restaurants, only open Thursday to Sunday and whatever. So you don't want to inhibit, because businesses are different. But if you have a business, then that business needs to be available to people X number of hours and not be used as something else. So I don't know how to get there.
Well, you can't, I mean, the cannabis regulations require 70 hours. I mean, the state requires that. If you're doing retail, you have to be open, they have to be open a minimum of 70 hours. That's
A maximum or a minimum?
I think I'm trying to think which it was.
I think it's max.
Anyway.
Maybe a max of 70. It's a
Okay.
max of 70.
Yeah,
but
because
the
they don't want them open more hours.
no, but the state is basically saying, you've got to have it, and they do tell you what those hours are to be. So they're very
I
strict.
don't even know if I want to be that strict. I just want these places not to be boarded up and make the community look bad. It's not that they don't pay taxes. It's
Right.
not, I'm not arguing about that. So they're not breaking any codes because they're nothing. They're a shell with whatever the heck they're
Okay.
doing. Nor am I saying that they are doing something illegal. So if we could look into that, so
Sure.
that to me is like the
Sure.
null set that needs to be addressed.
Can I ask you a quick question, Mayor? You mentioned that all the municipalities have this law. Do you recall which
Well,
municipalities?
Briarcliff, I didn't get a chance to finish, but Briarcliff, when you have a retail in that main strip, you actually have to be open, because 2 of the places left because they didn't want to, they were doing more on the internet. So they moved to a 2nd floor over the patio because they were making more money as a web company than they were in the retail. So they closed up because they were required to be open. I forgot the name, it was like that designer.
I just,
Yeah.
out of
And
curiosity, so
they
I'll,
still
yeah.
have that, but they did. I mean, they may not have it at this point, because it's not about being vacant, you understand?
No, of course. No, I
Because
understand
like,
that.
let's
Yeah.
say you went out of business and the store is vacant.
Yeah.
Like Bob's is vacant, that's not, but maybe in 2 or 3 years, there has to be a point where you say you can't, or you have to do something. These are businesses actually doing stuff, legal, but is there,
Yeah, they're not open to, and in this, in that case, the example you said is not open to the public.
there's
and-
also some
yeah.
businesses that basically are open like a couple of hours here and there, and that's just not good to the community
Right.
because it.
We can look for
creates-
that. We can look into that.
If we could look into
Sure.
that, I know it's a challenge.
No, absolutely.
So what I took notes. Some of the, oh.
Oh,
You
it's on. You're just not close enough.
Sorry. I took notes of the items that the board wants. us to
Yeah.
look into. So my suggestion would be, we'll come back with some revisions. Once this board feels comfortable with those revisions, then we'll start engaging the other boards, or whoever else you want to take a look at what's being proposed. And then we'll get recommendations back to this board. And then at that point, you want to move forward with the official recommendation for planning board to take it upon.
So I just want to ask as a personal, it's not like a 5-person vote. My request and Manny's, I think, to just have a few more eyes, because I'm envisioning at the end of this, a piece of paper at the end, we thank this person, that person, this, and why. 2 years from now, when people say they're gonna see a couple of chairs from committees that deal with this every day, the attorneys that were the land use, Valerie who does, you put a little thing so that the village manager, Madi Sahaj, who has been involved in her, it's the roles of the people, obviously Stuart, the board, the this,
Yeah.
the that. Because I think there has to be an understanding that it's not you and Stuart sitting in a room, the pace people, just something that says we
Happy to.
acknowledge. So that everything we do has to be good for a few years.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean,
And I think we should be gracious to the people that did work on this. I know they get paid, but that's not really my point.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Valerie and I can sit through a discussion on a single family detached and attached. We can have other people do the same.
Oh, that's right. Listen, this is great. We talked about this a number of years ago. I know you talked about it a long time ago. But this is a step. I was gonna say baby step, but I don't want to insult anybody. We're on plan. This is where we're going. So please tell me now, you told me the next steps to this, but this is chapter 1 of 3 chapters, I think, that we originally.
Right, well, maybe
This is
4 or
chapter
5.
yeah.
We got short-term rental added to it too.
Couple
But
of
it-
things.
but-
No, but I want to get the big picture
Yeah.
back
Well,
on track, so
just-
we all
just-
understand what this
right.
project is.
And just so you know, a couple of things.
Not bad on
the-
time.
The payment in lieu of parking was reviewed by the planning board.
That's correct.
We are going to want to come back to this
Okay.
board because they had a few recommendations.
Yep.
The cannabis changes went to the planning board and they did not have any changes to it, but they
Right.
thought it was fine. So at some point, those 2 changes will come back to you in terms of a work session, and then we can go forward and see if you talk about what they wanted to do in terms of payment in lieu, and then go forward with public hearings there. With regard to this is only the first of what will be multiple buckets. And part of that will also involve changes to, for example, chapter 162, which is our housing code, because much of what is in here is going to go into the
Yeah.
housing code. But we have to do more substantive changes that relate to this. Parking would be one. There are many other aspects of it, but we wanted to deal with the definitional changes first, because everything will flow from that.
Right, so when don't we need to have like milestones? Where are we? I mean, originally we were told it's
Yes.
like a 3-year gig, so, we understand the complexity but we're heading in the right direction, even if we only get some of the chapters done, it's more than what we've had until now. Excellent.
All right, and we can come, I think, we're
Yeah,
planning to bring the other 2 items back to the board in
September.
September. So maybe we can come back with like some suggested revisions to some of your comments in September,
yeah.
and then we start
That's fine.
with getting comments from the other boards and committees and
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
Thank you, Valerie.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Not too
Valerie.
bad. 9:30, 9:40.
Can we have a motion to adjourn into executive session for matters relating to investigations?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. 9:42. We are done. We will be back in September. We have a short meeting. I keep forgetting that one. What's the date on that one?
August
16th, a week from today.
August 16th. We're gonna have a short meeting. We'll announce it, and then we'll be back in September. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank
night.
you.